Welcome back to the Spicy Take Sports Podcast for Week 4 of the college football season. I'm Elijah. With me, I have Colton and Caleb. How y'all doing?
Good.
Doing good. It feels good to be back. It's been about a week and a half since we all had a podcast together.
Yeah, last week we had the NFL, which is Caleb and me, and then last time we had our baseball podcast. But
yeah, and we had some technical difficulties, and we should have started like an hour ago. But it's fine. We're here with the
technology.
Thank God for my roommate. I came and sit today. I was been confused.
Yeah, thank God for
Thank God for nerds.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. Not tech savvy. We'll get there one day. But so it's college football podcast.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy that we're back for the college football podcast because there was a lot to talk about from last week, and then even early on. We're recording this Friday night, and so there's been a couple games that have went final, a couple upsets actually that have already went final. So definitely a lot of stuff to talk about. First off, we're just start talking about last week and some of the biggest things that happened. I mean, obviously, I think the number one thing is the Florida-Alabama game was a heck of a football game.
Yeah, that was a heck of a game. Yeah, I mean,
were you all expecting that, or were you all I know going into the game, I thought that Alabama would win by 3 touchdowns.
I didn't expect them to win by 3. I expected a 17-point win was my bet. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I was probably projecting more like 2 touchdowns. I mean, I thought Florida was going to at least keep it close, just because it was in the swamp, keep it close probably through 3 quarters, and Bama would probably run away with it. But, I mean, Florida looked good.
I didn't think Florida was going to start Emory Jones either. So
yeah, I was shocked that they played so well with Emory Jones. I mean, he's not bad, but I just thought Richardson was their best chance to win.
Well, but Richardson had the injury that turned him into the emergency backup only, basically. At least that's what Mullen said. That might not be true, but I think it speaks more to. I think like a good question now at this point is Florida kind of provided a blueprint to score on Alabama, or at least you'd think that was a blueprint, as long as Alabama doesn't step up their game too much. But I think that's a blueprint. So what teams are capable at the top now of exploiting that? I mean, interestingly enough, I would say that Alabama's defensive style right now and their lack of ability to penetrate in the defensive line. If you have a good offensive line and you have a good running quarterback and a good running back where you can run the read option or the pitch fakes and stuff like that. I mean, Ohio State has that kind of an offense. I could see like an Ohio State Alabama game actually being a track meet because Ohio State's offense matches up good with what Alabama doesn't do well on defense, but Ohio State's defense will never stop Alabama either.
I think that would be a pretty good game. I mean, I'm not too sold on Ohio State this year with how they've looked so far.
No.
I think for me, there are a few teams I could see giving Alabama an issue. I think there's 2 main issues on the Alabama team, and they're both on defense. There's a lot of hype about their defense going into the year. I think there's even more hype once they just absolutely demolished Miami, but now we see how Miami is. We'll kind of get to that a little bit later for how they've struggled last week. But we kind of see what Miami really is, and that's not a very good football team. So, I mean, I think a lot of that hype kind of isn't as strong now after seeing Miami. But I think your 2 main issues is they are not getting any penetration on the D-line. And the secondary wasn't great either. Like, it wasn't as good as they usually are. So my 2 teams I really think could give them issues. This is a take, and they're going to play later on this year, and I'm going to stick to this take unless something major injury happens or something like that. I think Ole Miss does upset Alabama this year. I think that it's pretty spicy, but my thing is Matt Corral has has a rocket of an arm, so he can make some of those deep passes down the field that no matter how good your defense is, if you don't get any pressure, they can still get burned on them. And then
I don't know if that's the issue though. I think Florida, I guess this is my maybe spicy take, Florida versus Alabama will be the closest game Alabama has this entire regular season.
I could say that. I could see it. I think that the reason I think Ole Miss is really good is because that could be really good and have a good chance to beat Alabama is if you look at Alabama in previous years, and I mean, and earlier this year as well. If they don't get pressure on the D line, if they don't get in there, then they have a tendency to get carved up at some point in the game. I mean, remember they started out blowing out Florida, like a lot of people expected. In that second half, Florida just switched up the game plan a little bit, and it was like Alabama couldn't stop anything. If it wasn't for a missed extra point, that game's going to overtime, and who knows what happens. So I mean, I think that we lost a lot of the invincibility that you get from Alabama. And if there's anyone that's not going to be scared of Alabama, it's going to be Lane Kiffin, because Lane Kiffin's just Lane Kiffin. He's love him or hate him, he's got some guts to him.
Last year, Ole Miss was within one score of Alabama the entire game, basically. I mean, I think Ole Miss, like you said, is definitely one of those teams, top 3 or 4 teams. I think that has a logistic shot at knocking off Alabama. I believe is the game in Oxford. I think it's in Oxford.
I think so. I can double check what they say.
Which does make a difference, obviously. But I mean, I saw a poll. I want y'all's opinion.
It's in Tuscaloosa. It's
in Tuscaloosa.
Next Saturday. Not this Saturday, but next Saturday.
And Ole Miss has a bye week. I saw that. So there was a poll I saw on Twitter, and it said if you're, the SEC East champion, so Georgia or Florida more than likely, who would you rather play, Ole Miss or Alabama? And it was 50-50 split right down the middle. Which I found that pretty interesting because, I mean, yeah, Alabama's a juggernaut they usually are, but Ole Miss as a squad, I mean, they're dangerous. Matt Corral, I think, right now is a leader for the Heisman. I mean, him and Bryce Young, but I don't know, Matt Corral, in my opinion, though, has a nod a little bit. But what's y'all's take on that?
I mean, I guess to start off, I mean, maybe it's just more of a lingering kind of thing, but I would always rather face a different team than Alabama. I mean, even if it's only just because of, I don't think, first off, you can't really get more talented than Alabama. Like Ole Miss might have similar talent or maybe even equal, but I literally don't think it's possible to have more talent than Alabama puts on the field every single week. Second of all, I don't know. I don't think I would trust any coaching staff more than Alabama to be able to, even if they're having an issue, like to come out and make the right adjustments, to find the weakness in your team and then start exploiting it. Like Alabama doesn't start fast every time. They started fast against Florida, but they don't start fast every time. Sometimes it takes them a little bit to start putting points up. But once Saban's offense identifies what your team isn't able to stop, they'll just run it at you again and again and again and again and again and again until you prove you can stop it. So, and I mean, the other thing I was going to comment there on the game between Alabama and Ole Miss is the other thing is like, it kind of depends if you ask me, it kind of comes down to how athletic and how much of a threat can Corral be to get outside the pocket, make throws on the run, or pick up 5, 10, 15 yards with his legs if Alabama's playing man coverage with their backs to him. Because, I mean, I was looking at the stats here. Emory Jones had 19 runs for 76 yards and a touchdown. That's a big deal. I mean, Florida ended up running for over 200 something yards on Alabama at over 5 yards a clip. Emory Jones only threw for 195. Alabama almost lost on the back of not being able to stop the run. Everything with beating Alabama starts with being able to establish the run. So, I haven't paid much attention to how good Ole Miss's running game is. And frankly, I'm not sure anyone has, because everyone's focused on how good Corral's doing. But I think, and I trust that Lane Kiffin's smart enough to realize this, but I think Lane needs to not be overconfident in having Corral try and zip it around the field all over against Alabama, because the secondary and the linebackers are the strength of that team right now with the way that the defensive line is playing.
And also, like you said, Alabama, they're usually always top 3, top 5 in talent every single year. And Matt Corral threw 6 interceptions last season, went 4 touchdowns, 6 picks. I believe that was that Arkansas game?
LSU.
It's like
LSU.
LSU, my apologies. Yeah, LSU. But it was still a West opponent that, isn't. I mean, LSU was a little down last year, but still 6 interceptions. And then you're going into Tuscaloosa. I mean, it's gonna be interesting to see. I mean, I think Ole Miss, they need to find a running game, and I don't believe they have one. Just like you said, I mean, they just throw the ball so often. I feel like it sounds like it's non-existent because no one talks about it. And he's not really much of a running quarterback. I mean, I'm sure he'll scramble if he has to, but
He's
Not
got some.
probably.
He's not gonna be your call options over and over again or anything.
He's not like he's not going to go into the Bryant Denny Stadium and pull a Johnny football. It's not going to be like that. It's going to be like he's not going to run all over the yard.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to those, I mean, as I said, I think Ole Miss is going to upset him. Just there's something weird about it. I feel like it just feels like a really weird team to me. I talked to Colton earlier this week about it, and I was saying that I think that Ole Miss can upset Alabama, but I think they'll lose a stupid game they shouldn't lose, based on the type of offense they run. And the thing about this Ole Miss team is, I feel like they can get ahead early with the type of offense they have. And I know Bryce Young's look very, very good, but how's the freshman gonna do in prime time, coming from behind against a top 15 opponent? I mean, that we'll kind of know. I mean, I'm not saying that I think Alabama is gonna be a definite loss or anything. I'm picking Ole Miss, but either way, I think that when it comes to the thing about people asking, would you rather face an Ole Miss or Alabama in the conference championship game? I don't want to be contradicting myself or anything here, but I think that if you're at Georgia, you much rather would see Ole Miss in the SEC championship game than you would see in Alabama, because
As a Georgia fan, I would say most definitely.
I think a lot of it's the aura of Alabama, though. I really do. I mean, if you you see Alabama come in, there's a certain level of, oh crap, this is a big game. Obviously, this championship is already a big game, but just seeing Alabama on your schedule is like, oh no, like it's just a feeling. Versus if you see Ole Miss, it's like, okay, we can win this game. But either way, another big thing that happened last week, obviously Penn State, Auburn. It was just a good game. We kind of talked about this a little bit last week. Kind of came out pretty close to how we expected. Where both teams were, it was close the whole way. I mean, Bo Nix didn't look great, but that doesn't really shock me in the slightest. But
no, not shocking at all.
He's kind of had a fall from grace. He was such a highly touted freshman, and now he's like a middle of the pack SEC quarterback.
I do love what he did, though. He's starting to play into the joke and decided to sell T-shirts now with his "This is the year Bo Nix" shirts. He started to sell those for charity, so I kind of appreciate that. It's pretty cool.
I mean, he's marketing himself. I mean, that's funny. I mean,
yeah,
good, I guess.
But I think the other two main stories. I mean, one thing isn't really a main story, but just gonna say my upset of last week did come true about UCLA dropping to Fresno. Just Fresno, that quarterback they have is flipping awesome. Like, went down with an injury on the last drive and stayed in the game. Yeah, Hainer stayed in the game on that last drive after going down with an injury and led him for a game-winning score. Some guts on that guy. And I think they deserve to be ranked. But as we're speaking now, they're actually getting beat by UNLV.
Yeah, they're losing 14-9, I think, at half.
Yeah. But I think the main story from last week, if we're talking about like just takeaways, Ohio State looks really, really rough.
They're not that good.
Same with Ohio State and Clemson. Both of those two looked very, very rough last week. Clemson was
kind of talented but undisciplined is what I've been seeing with Ohio State. They don't look like a cohesive unit. There's a lot of individual plays going on, but it takes all 11 in order to come out with a win, and they're just not playing together, or like one guy is making a mistake at a time that's ruining everything. As I was thinking about, it's like that's the issue when you bring in a whole ton of new starters, smash them all together, and are like, hey, go play. Because they're bound to make mistakes. And with football, only one guy making a mistake is enough to mess up your entire play. So if you've got a bunch of new guys that are prone to mistakes here and there, you're going to be constantly messing up plays. I don't think they have the veteran depth.
I mean, like I said, football is so much of a chemistry game. I mean, just playing it. I mean, playing in high school and such like that, you figure it out. It's such a chemistry game. I mean, quarterback, like for instance, Joe Burrow right now is playing with Jamar Chase. So when he played throughout college, but now he's playing in the NFL, and that chemistry is obviously noticeable. So I mean, these players that just jump in, we only have basically a fall camp together. These true freshmen that are so talented, they have all this talent, but they need a while to mold together. So it's gonna take some time, maybe next season or so.
I mean, Ohio State, that Tulsa game it's 21-point win, but that game was tied with 4 minutes left in the game. I mean, Ohio State, I was saying earlier in the year, I was not high on CJ Stroud. And he's just look very undisciplined. He looks like a freshman. Not, I don't think he's gonna. I think he's gonna be good in the future. I just don't see it right now. He's out for the next game. Ryan Day said, but but I actually am more concerned about Clemson than anything. Like Georgia Tech's a bad football team.
Yeah,
Like
they lost to Northern Illinois at home.
like they are a very bad football team, and they were a yard away from upsetting Clemson, who people going into last week, even after losing to Georgia, people still had them in their top five. A lot of people did, and to beat Georgia Tech by 6 and literally be a yard away from losing to Georgia Tech. DJ does not look like that superstar that a lot of people were expecting from him.
I just had a feeling going to the season when Travis Etienne was gone. I mean, it's hard when X amount of players leave off your offensive line and a few players, Powell left wide receiver and they had another slot guy. I can't think of his name right now, but I mean,
Rogers.
Yeah, Rogers. That's what I was trying to think of. I mean, just guys that were super reliable last year that he really went to when he played Notre Dame and he had a good game. I mean, they're not there now.
Still got Justin Ross though. I feel like there's no excuse for that part. I just think they're putting a lot on his plate for being a first year starter. I mean, he got some playing time last year, but they're like, I don't know. I know everyone's like, I guess this will be my spicy take. That's not a game pick of the thing. And I'd love to hear you guys' opinions on this. Do you think that maybe Clemson is putting too much on him? Because everyone like doesn't ever want to say Dabo Swinney does anything wrong. You know what I mean? But
yeah,
they're kind of I feel like the offense looks like it did with Trevor Lawrence, but they just slapped DJ in there and told him to run the same thing. I mean, that ain't gonna happen. DJ wasn't even close to being as refined as Trevor was coming out of high school. And especially not now when Trevor was in there for 3 years running that offense and getting more complex, and just putting him in there and trying to have him make the same calls, the same reads, do the same kind of things is kind of hamstringing him, I feel like.
Yes, see that. I think they are going away from the run game a little bit more than they even were in the previous years. I feel like they're putting more on the passing game than they were before, even when Lawrence was there, which honestly is not a very smart decision. But that being said, putting too much on him, I see that. I feel like the offense is a little bit questionable. I feel like they're expecting to do a lot, but you got to beat teams like Georgia Tech by more than 6 when your defense still is not giving up an offensive touchdown all year. Like they've had 2 games this year already where they've combined for 21 points in 2 games. One was against Georgia, so that's kind of excusable. Well, not excusable to only score 7 points, but when Georgia's defense is that good, at least you understand it. But against Georgia Tech, you put 14 up. I mean, I think that he does have a lot on his plate and probably a little bit too much for a young guy like him, but still got to put up more than 14 points. I mean, what do you think, Colton?
I think maybe they just need to allow him to kind of go at his own pace with the offense and just kind of play the game like, we used to in the backyard. I mean, that's kind of what football is all about. And sometimes players will get caught up in the X's and O's of the game, which obviously you got to know your plays and all that. But my point is some people just kind of take the fun out of the game. And then maybe that's what's happened to him. He has so much pressure. It's just like a job right now instead of, him just going out there and throwing the ball and playing football. So if they can kind of not dumb down the playbook, but just kind of, hey, DJ, what do you want to run? Is this something you're comfortable with? Maybe they're not even asking his advice for what he wants to do. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe he's just like you said, like he just has so much pressure that literally he's just crumbling and he just can't make the plays he needs to. So that's just kind of my take on it. I mean, we'll see what happens when they play NC State. NC State's a pretty solid football team. So if he goes out there and puts up like 35, then, it's a little bit better. So we'll see. I mean, like
valid upset pick of the week, though, I feel like.
Yeah, it definitely could be. I mean, it's at NC State. NC State's, I mean, it was Florida State a few years ago. Florida State was ranked really high and they knocked them off. So, I mean, they're one of those teams kind of remind me of like Iowa or, Iowa State. Usually like teams like that will catch someone off guard, but they're usually not that great. It's a 3:30 game. So, I mean, it's kind of middle tier.
Mhm. All right, so let's get into the top 25 real quick. There's a couple top 25s I kind of want to go over. First, I want to go over probably the most, I don't want to be rude, the most questionable top 25 I've ever seen. RJ Young, I know he's a pundit, I get that. But come on. Like some of his top 25s are just extremely questionable. Um, he's very, I feel like a lot of the reason he does this is just for clicks, which is frustrating to me. But I mean, just for a rundown, top five, he's got Alabama, Oregon, Georgia, Iowa, Penn State. Uh, then 6 through 10, he's got Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Arkansas, A&M. 11 through 15, BYU, Clemson, Cincinnati, Coastal, and Rutgers. 16 through 20, Michigan State, Kansas State, Ole Miss, Maryland, Michigan, and then 21 to 25 is Wisconsin, Iowa State, TCU, Florida, and Fresno. There's a lot that's wrong with this list, in my opinion. First thing, I feel like Oregon over Georgia. I understand Oregon had a really good win against Ohio State, but if you're putting that much stock in the Oregon win on Ohio State, why don't you put the same amount of stock in Georgia beating Clemson? Because they both struggled this year, but they both were good wins. And Georgia just has more talent than Oregon, in my opinion. And then I like Iowa at 4. I do. I think that's not bad. I think you could even argue for Iowa to be 3, honestly. I think you could do that, but I don't mind that. Oklahoma at 6, I think might be a little bit high, but I mean they haven't lost yet, so I guess you can't really put up too much. I don't even mind Arkansas at 9. I mean they've looked extremely good. I don't think they're that good, but they've looked very, very good. My first big issue, other than the 2 and 3, is BYU at 11. I understand they've looked good, but I think it's a little bit high. And then I feel like once he gets to 11, his 11 through 25 just is an absolute mess. Like,
Yeah, how is Florida 24th and Rutgers is 15th? That makes 0 sense. Rutgers hasn't faced a ranked opponent this season.
I don't get how Rutgers is 15, but Ole Miss is 18. Like,
yeah, that the 18th, Florida's 24th.
I feel like it's almost a purposeful attempt to try and like put SEC teams lower just because they have losses or something with Florida, or I don't really know. It's
Ole
like
Miss
one of
isn't a
those
loss.
anti-SEC brackets that you used to see where people got mad because there'd be like 8 SEC teams in the top 25 and they acted like that was wrong for some reason.
I mean,
It's like it hurts, but it's true.
I mean, Ole Miss is 18th, and they haven't lost yet. And I mean, they've literally not won a game by less than 30 this year. So I mean, if you look at eye test, I mean, they are definitely better. I mean, Kansas State is not very good. I mean, they're top 20, they're 25th in the actual AP poll. I mean, Maryland, like I don't even mind Michigan in the top 20. I think they've looked very, very good this year. But to think he has Rutgers and Maryland higher than Michigan is a little bit questionable.
Just, I mean, also he has TCU. TCU hasn't really played anyone this year, and TCU.
Yeah, I don't mind putting teams like that at the bottom of the top 25 if they're undefeated in a big conference but my issue is when you have Florida. I understand they lost to Alabama, but when you have Florida who lost by 2 points, and if they would have made an extra point, would have been an overtime against the number 1 team in the country at home. I understand they're at home and all that, but still, to do that when everyone was picking them to lose by 21 to 30, 20, 17 to 25 points, to do that and for you to drop them to 24th in your rankings, it's a little bit just absurd in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I know Clemson hasn't looked amazing, but 12th. I mean, if they go out to NC State and they win by like 3, yeah, they don't deserve to really be in the top 10. But they go out there and win by like 3. I mean, and they should definitely be in the top 10, 12. That's just a little weird too. But we'll see. Definitely more interesting as the season plays out because we'll get more of a gist of how accurate this really was. But right now, just looking at, to me, the two most bizarre things, as you said, is the Oregon Georgia needs to be at least flipped, and the Florida thing is just as weird. I think Caleb's right. He's just trying to stiff the SEC to maybe to get more views. I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Now the actual top 25 is a little bit better. You got Alabama, Georgia, Oregon, Oklahoma, Iowa, Penn State, A&M, Cincinnati, Clemson, Ohio State, Florida, Notre Dame, Ole Miss, Iowa State, BYU, Arkansas, Coastal, Wisconsin, Michigan, Michigan State, North Carolina, Fresno, Auburn, UCLA, and Kansas State. And then your next votes out were TCU and then Liberty, who just got beat tonight. Virginia Tech and Oklahoma State.
It's kind of funny. That might be the most agreeable list I've ever seen for like week 4. I feel like that's really really good top 25.
I feel like the only thing, yeah, I agree.
There's only like, I mean, every team could maybe go up 1 or 2 spots or down 1 or 2 spots, depending on the thing for a couple of them, but nothing that's like egregious.
Yeah, I mean, my only gripe, I think, it's not even that big of a gripe. I would move Oklahoma down to 6 and move Iowa State and Penn State up. No, Iowa and Penn State up 1.
Yeah.
5 to 4 and 5. But even with that, Oklahoma's not lost yet. I just don't feel like they've looked as good as Iowa and Penn State have. But everything else in the top 25, honestly, looks pretty good. I think I'd probably have Michigan over Wisconsin because Michigan has looked very, very good and Wisconsin has lost already. But Penn State's top 5 now in the nation. So what's your thoughts, Colton?
Yeah, like you both said, this is pretty accurate. Maybe there's like a couple of teams that just flip maybe a ranking or two, but there's really no one that I would take out. Even if you look at the very bottom of the ranking or the bottom tier where it has UCLA, UCLA is still a pretty solid football team. Yeah, they dropped 11 spots, but they beat LSU, which is Power 5 SEC school. So to beat them as well as they did, granted it was at home, still a solid win. Auburn went into a hostile environment in Happy Valley and lost by 1 score. There's a lot of good teams this year in football. It's I don't know. It's kind of more even than usual in my opinion. They're Alabama's, they're Bama, but at the same time, they, like we said, if Florida would have made that extra point overtime, they probably could have actually won that game. It was at the Swamp. So it's not like, I don't know, it's just kind of different in my opinion. It kind of has an 07 vibe. I don't know.
UCLA, honestly, I think that's exactly where they should be, is around 24. I think they're still a ranked team. But I thought I told you last week, I thought they were a little bit overranked at 13.
Yeah.
And I think around 24 is where they should be. They're a solid team and they're going to give any team in the Pac-12 fits to go up against. But also, I think they're going to lose a couple of games that 25th ranked teams usually are.
I can definitely see UCLA winning the Pac-12. Who else is really going to give a run for the money? Arizona State just lost to BYU.
Yeah.
BYU, maybe that's why BYU is a little higher in some rankings. They're 15th, jumping 9 spots, 8 spots. I need glasses.
Good. Well, that's going to have to wrap up part 1. We're going to start part 2 real quick and we'll get that up. We'll get that up as well.